Then we got the news out this morning that the Justice Department and the Department of Homeland Security have subpoenaed the company over their treadmill injuries. So we want to bring in James Hardiman. He's an analyst who covers the stock. He's the managing director at Wedbush. And James, I think the big question, investors clearly concerned about this announcement, but how big of a blow or how big of a challenge could this potentially be for Peloton?
Well, it's a big deal on a number of fronts, and it's difficult for me to speculate whether the DOJ investigation will ultimately turn into something. Obviously, that is something that the company and certainly investors need to take very seriously. But I think what it's not too early to deduce from all of this is that this is yet another issue that affects the Peloton brand in general, but in particular the Peloton treadmill brand. The product that they're rolling out on Monday is a new treadmill. It had its own recall, but it was relatively minor related to the screen. It was their old treadmill, the much more expensive version that had these major safety issues, right, where a child died and there were a number of pretty significant injuries. And I think if you ask most people on the street, they're not aware that there are two different treadmills with two very different risk profiles. And given that it's the most recent treadmill that they're really counting on to be their second app, that's a problem. That is a branding problem that they are going to have to figure out if they want to be successful in selling that product. And that, I think, is the most important question from an investor's perspective.
I've got two questions. One is real simple, and I hope you know the answer to it, which is, why did Department of Homeland Security subpoena Peloton? Do we know what they're looking at? I mean, DHS, and then go ahead.
That was an eyebrow raiser for me as well. I'm not sure what the answer to that one.
Okay, but the other question is, these issues with the treadmills aside, with people going back to the gym, even with COVID-19 cases rising, is the outlook for Peloton problematic?
Well, I would say that a couple things. The stock has actually, I think, held in there better than expected as the Delta variant has spread. And so as we think about COVID winners and losers, obviously Peloton was one of the biggest winners of the pandemic. I think there were some indications earlier this summer, a month ago, that trends were slowing. But the stock is actually held in there, I think, in part because there is some open question as to when we're going to go back to normality with respect to our exercise habits. I don't believe that I've seen any data points, and when asked about it yesterday on the call, management hadn't either, that would suggest that they are a Delta play in much the same way they were an initial COVID play. But that remains to be seen, and could potentially help these guys. But I think the point that I've made to investors is, if you've gone the last year and a half, right, and you haven't gotten around to buying a Peloton product or some other sort of exercise equipment for your home, the delay that is represented by Delta and other variants probably isn't going to push you in that direction.
James, they also just cut the price of their original bike by just around $400. I guess, what do you think that this would potentially do for sales? Is it going to be maybe the boost that Peloton needs right now?
100%. I mean, that will stimulate sales. I don't think there's any question there. It is in a completely different neighborhood, so to speak, at that $14.95 price point. We always knew that this was in the arsenal, that this is a tool that they could use sales. I was a bit surprised by the timing, to be perfectly honest. Given that the guidance for the upcoming quarter was as weak as it was, the fact that they lowered the price now, I think, suggests that it's more necessity than luxury that they went ahead and did that. And I think that's what investors are looking at, the idea that like for like demand, all else being equal, demand is waning for their product to a certain degree. I mean, this is still a great company with good long-term growth prospects. But I think they did have to lower the price to continue along this growth trajectory.
You lowered your price target from 115 to 107. What are you looking for in the short term? I mean, they closed down at 104 today, but what are you looking for in the short term as a sign that they're back on the trajectory they need to be back on?
So we've talked in the past about, Peloton. They can't just be a one-trick pony, right? They need a second act. I think most people, me included, thought that this new lower price treadmill was the best opportunity for that. So that is going to be something that we're watching quite closely. There's been a lot of speculation that they were going to come out with a Peloton rower. I think that's likely to happen probably late this year, early next. Maybe that could be the catalyst. And certainly the recently announced price decrease on the original bike. Just how much demand does that ultimately stimulate? Those are the three big questions. And if we're able to answer them in a positive way, then the sky's the limit for this company. But it is going to be more difficult, right? I mean, the last year and a half, they couldn't help but sell as many products as they could make because alternatives were very much limited. That's no longer the case today, and so they're going to have to be really good in terms of their operations.
James, what about those supply issues that we've talked with you about numerous times over the past year and a half? Are they officially a thing of the past now? Has Peloton gotten a grasp now just in terms of they're able to meet demand that they're seeing for their bikes and their treadmills?
That's right. Now, the million-dollar question is, were they able to satisfy demand because they got better on the supply chain side and the fulfillment side, or were they better able to meet demand because demand has come in? And I think it's probably a combination of both. They're still paying more than hopefully they will need to on the supply chain front, and certainly on the raw materials front as we look further into the future. Hopefully that's not the case. But if you want a bike right now, you can get a bike in a week or two. And that's about as low of a order to delivery time as we've seen ever for this company.
It's much better. I think when I ordered my bike, I was waiting, 15 or 16 weeks at that point. So much better than it was about a year ago. James Hardiman, Wedbush's managing director. Thanks as always for hopping on with us. And again, Peloton shares closing off just around 8.5% today. We're going to take a quick break. On the other side, it's time for our small business spotlight. We've got that when we come back.